Hello, everyone. This is Fernando with Texas United Realty. Welcome to our webinar. Today we have a special guest, Linda Wilkins. She's a certified appraiser and also an accredited stager. She's with Lake Houston Lifestyle Homes and Properties. And she's going to be talking today regarding the Appraisal 101, the basics, which is probably a real good topic for all of us because sometimes we get confused as to what an appraisal is, what an appraisal might look like, how's the data gathered, and do we really have to have an appraisal? We hear that the lenders need this essential appraisal report, but what if we're buying in cash? Is that an option that we don't have to pursue? So I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to Linda, and Linda, go ahead and get started.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. Linda Wilkins here, and my company is actually Linda Wilkins Real Estate Sales, Appraising, and Staging. And first of all, Fernando asked me to address something that may be of concern to you, and it is, what does it take to become a real estate appraiser in Texas? Well, there are 4 levels of appraisers, and I hope you all can see my screens and hear my voice. Certified general appraiser, which I am, certified residential appraiser, a licensed appraiser, and an appraiser trainee. Of course, you have to start out as a trainee and work your way up, obviously, through licensing, and then the top 2 designations are exactly that. These are the credentials, and I know that y'all don't want to sit and read through all of this, but if you do have some questions about it, Fernando says that he's recording this and that it will be available to you on a playback basis. One thing I would like to point out, though, on the certified general, we are the ones that do the actual trainees. We take on the trainees and teach them how to be appraisers, and we're required to have 3,000 hours of appraisal experience, with 1,500 of that in non-residential. So a good portion of mine was in non-residential until the past, say, 20 years when I started into strictly residential. So this is the certified residential credentials here. Why is an appraisal necessary? Well, if everybody in the world was a cash buyer, it would not be necessary. You wouldn't even see an appraisal. But because we go to lenders and ask them, or our buyers go to lenders and ask them to take on the risk of the majority of the indebtedness here, you might say. For instance, we'll go and our buyers will take out a 95% loan, a 97% loan. FHA, I think, is 3.5% is all they're requiring down. So with this point, we're putting the lender at a lot of risk. But of course, we understand that most lenders don't have that deep of pockets, that they have to go into the secondary market for their funding. So they're going to package up all of these loans that they write, and included in those loans are the appraisals that give verification of the value. So as an example of the secondary market, they're called GSEs. We have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, and I know that you've all heard of them. Anyhow, they buy these loans on the secondary market, and there are other private investors that do so as well. Something very interesting that is coming up, and actually started in 17 and is just growing in force, is Fannie and Freddie approved thousands of loans with no formal appraisals. Now, this is particularly for properties valued under $250,000, and typically with buyers that have very good credit and have very good down payments as well. But the interesting thing about all this is, to me, is the cost savings. Since 2017, Fannie Mae has acquired roughly 60,000 no appraisal mortgages and saved borrowers $30 million. Now think about that. And this is only going to continue to progress as long as the real estate market stays fairly stable and we don't have any debacles like we did in 2008. So let's talk about some of the basics of appraisals. So on your screen, you should be able to see, this is the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac form. It's used by both. It's also used by FHA, and it's also used by BA. And the 2 pages to the left are the grid, the appraisal grid, and that's where all of the comparables are adjusted to the subject. The subject is in the far left and that's always where it's going to be. And you'll see the comparables are numbered with their addresses. To the far right is the market condition addendum, where the appraiser goes in and actually analyzes current market conditions within a very defined market area. And that's usually the subject subdivision is how that works out. So residential appraisals are ordered by the lender, and the lender picks up the phone and calls what they call an AMC, an appraisal management company. That puts an additional firewall between the lender and the appraiser. The AMC contacts the appraiser, and the appraiser then typically contacts the selling realtor. Typical cost for residential appraisal ranges from about $400 to $600 for a single family residence. And in most cases, the buyer pays for that appraisal simply because it is for the buyer's lender to make their loan decision, and of course to sell it on the secondary market. The typical time frame for an appraisal is 3 to 4 days, but it can take up to a week, especially in busy seasons like we're in right now. Realtors are allowed, remember this, they're allowed to talk with the appraiser about anything in the world except the property value. So that means you can discuss you can feature benefit the property with the appraiser, and please do so. Realtors are allowed to provide comparables to the appraiser. Now, appraisers move pretty fast. They look at 3, 4, 5 houses a day because they have to, because particularly this time of year. So you are not going to spend a lot of time chatting with the appraiser, but you could send them comparables. But please do not tell them that you need a certain value or have a value discussion. You cannot do that. Realtors should provide a list of special features and amenities to the appraiser. For instance, if your seller just recently changed out the roof, changed out the AC units, those are types of things that the appraiser needs to know, and they will enhance the value. Now, can an appraiser estimate land value? This is an important concept because that's the basis of every appraisal. The appraiser always estimates the land value. Well, where do they get those land values from? We go into MLS. That's the easiest place for us to find land sales in most cases. And we analyze those sales and come up with a value for the land. And that basically starts the appraisal process. Here's some common appraisal misconceptions. Believe this or not. That's why I put it in red letters. The Central Appraisal District was not created to provide square footage of properties for the real estate market. It simply was not. And here is a case study, and there's a realtor on this call that may have experience with this. Let's just put it that way. There was a home down in the Pearland area that was supposed to have roughly 2,700 square foot. The listing realtor used that figure to price the home and roughly $100 a square foot at $270,000. The appraiser, the lender's appraiser, came in and appraised the property measured it with only having 2,400 square foot. So when you applied that $100 per square foot listing price, you only came up with $240,000. I'm sure you see the problem here. Large disparity. The seller was shocked because they had been paying taxes on 2,700 square foot. Anyhow, the seller conceded and the sale did go through, but this happens an awful lot. So what I'm trying to tell you is it is important to know the square footage, because this is where a lot of problems come in with appraisals not coming up to the value or the contract price. And here are some suggestions. When you check the appraisal district to get the square footage, when you go to the property, take a tape measure and a laser and measure it yourself. You can measure the property. The only problem with this is that if you put in your number, you are liable for it, just like the appraiser is liable for it. Do you want that liability? I'm going to say you probably don't, because it could be very expensive for you because you're pricing the home based on your number. So if you come up with a number that seems fairly close to the appraisal district, live with it, run with it. But if you see 200-300 square foot disparity, pick up the phone, call me, call an appraiser and ask to have the home measured. We start measuring at about $150. That's usually ranges of $150 to $300 to measure a house. And that $300 is a pretty good size house. But anyhow, That's your first line of defense, is to make sure you've got a good square footage. In an appraisal, adjustments for living area size are based on the sale price per square foot. Not false, very false. Appraisers do not use $100 a square foot. They're going to use the contributory value of the square footage, and I'm going to show you that in the next example. This is an actual appraisal, and this is the grid that I was referring to earlier. And you'll see that I have $25 a square foot highlighted, and you're thinking, well, where in the world does that come from? Well, let me explain just a couple basics to you. The property on the left, that is the subject. The comparables are adjusted to the subject. We never make any changes to the subject property. You'll notice that the subject has 1,173 square foot. Comparable 1 is smaller, comparables 2 and 3 are larger. The appraiser is required to bracket the living area size. Now, let's go back to contributory value. When you are pricing a home at $100 a square foot, you're including the garage space, the covered patios, the land, swimming pool, guest quarters, anything that's on that property. When the appraiser is valuing here under gross living area, that is the only increment, that is the only item of the property that the appraiser is valuing. At that particular point, it is just the square footage of living area. So it's not going to be at $100 or $90 a square foot. The appraiser is going to extract that from a paired sales analysis. And I did it just by using these 3 sales. I came up with adjustment of $25 a square foot. If you drop down to the very bottom and you see gross adjustment, look how narrow this is. It runs from $93,008 to $95,700. That's a pretty narrow range for property. Now, what the appraiser will do is go in and pick the property that they think is most similar and indicative of the subject property, and that will be the value. So once again, do not think that the appraiser is going to make adjustments. So when you're seeing this property down the street that has 100 square foot more than yours, don't multiply that difference by $100 a square foot. It won't work. Do not give an appraiser a CMA, the little quick CMA that we have in our matrix program. Do not do that. And I won't go through this whole analysis for time purposes, but you can see that, well, this is something that actually happened to me, and that's why I've highlighted it here. But if realtors give a CMA to the appraiser, you're just sending off the wrong signal. Just give MLS printouts of the actual comparables, the properties that you feel are comparable. If you have a question whether it's comparable, call me, an appraiser, and find out if it is for sure. This is a real area of misconception. How much value does a pool actually add? This particular swimming pool cost over $70,000 with its spa and its waterfalls and its beach entry. Now, how does an appraiser deal with something like that? What we do, we go into the defined market area of the subject property and we look for sales similar in size and amenities, basic amenities to the subject, like same size garage, same bedroom count, that sort of thing. And we come up with an average sale price. Then we go right back in and we extract all the sales that have pools. And we come up with an average or median price for that. We deduct the difference and we come up in this case with $17,000. And that would be the contributory value of that swimming pool. Not what it cost, not its depreciated cost, but what it actually contributes to the value of that property. I'm going to show you how it's actually applied here. And this gets a little more complicated than you probably would like to see, and typically today we're using 6 comparables, and so that's what I'm going to show you. The subject has a pool, and comparables 1 and 2 have a pool. Comp 3 does not. We jump to the next page. Once again, we see the subject repeated, and we see comp 4 and comp 5 both have pools, so there's no adjustment. Comp 6 does not. Now, when I wrote this appraisal, I adjusted the pool for the pool at $25,000. Let's look at the range. This is the really important part of it. gross adjustments ranged 385, comp 1 adjusted out 421, 404, 383, 405, and 390. I think it's 398. I can't see it very well myself. But anyhow, my point in saying all this is that we know that we have a pretty good figure if our range isn't real erratic. If our adjusted value range down at the bottom comes out pretty close, that's a result of a good pairing. And so conceivably, this pool may be worth $30,000, might be worth 22, but we're not far off at 25, and this is not an exact science. Now, this same pairing can be applied to guest quarters, barns, metal buildings, anything that is different in a property, you can make these same adjustments. So Fernando also asked me to address, what if there is insufficient data to complete a credible appraisal report? And believe me, when we're working rural properties, we come across this a whole lot. So what we do is we have a tendency to go back in time, and we utilize some older sales, and we make what we call market condition adjustments, but the easier way to say it is we make time adjustments. Sometimes we have to go out of that defined subdivision and maybe go to a neighboring subdivision to be able to come up with some numbers to make those adjustments. But that's how we do it, and we do it on the appraisal grid. Another thing that we do is expand the market area, and maybe there's sales in another subdivision. They may be over a mile away, which is kind of the criteria that most underwriters like, is for us to keep our comparables within a mile. So we'll expand that area, but then we will provide justification in our verbiage and tell them why we had to do that. And as a final thing, what we would do is add a cost approach to the appraisal, and we would then, of course, have our land value, the replacement cost new for the property, and then apply depreciation. It gets a little more complicated, so I didn't want to go into that a whole lot and create confusion for you. Clear as mud? Just a couple points I'd like to reiterate. Make sure going in, you know the square footage. You have a good feel for the square footage. Practice measuring your own home if you have to. List out the special features for the appraiser. Make sure and do that. If you do nothing else, leave it on the counter at the house. That's the thing to do at your listing. If there's any additions or modifications to the property, make sure and get copies of the building permits. If you can get a hold of the builder's floor plan, that's also a good thing for the appraiser to have too. Remember, once again, do not give a CMA using price per square foot to the appraiser. It could be the end of your contract. So when all is said and done, you've decided you didn't want to measure the house yourself to confirm the footage with the CAD. You wanted to hire an appraiser. Here we are. We measure according to ANSI standards, ANSI, and we will provide you with the square footage as well as a layout or floor plan of the house with interior room dimensions. If you're having a really hard time pricing the property, or perhaps you've overpriced it, you have a feeling you've overpriced it, you have excessive marketing time, that's another place we can help. We'll go over the comparables with you and tell you maybe where you should be. If you have an appraisal that came in and went south on you and you need some help to find out what happened, or to provide additional comparables to the lender for reconsideration of value, we can help you with that. Finally, if you have a client, maybe you sold the home to a couple of years ago, they're asking you to help them with the tax protest. We do not do tax protests, but we can help you with the comparables and make sure that you've got them on a good path, or we can help them ourselves. So you're not alone in this whole appraisal thing. We are here to help you. You're going to have my phone number, my email address. We charge on a basis of $50 an hour, but our first session is complimentary. We do it for free so that you can see how we work and see how we can help you. Here's my credentials. I'll be very brief about this. I am a real estate broker, a certified general appraiser, and accredited staging professional with over 35 years of experience. And here are some of the firms that I worked for. And there's my information. So Fernando, one last thing, I almost forgot. Next month, June 13th at 8:30, we'll be doing Staging 101. Don't miss it.
I'm excited about that one.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, one thing that, thank you very much, Linda. One thing that I didn't realize is that, and it just came into my mind is we're always thinking as new agents and as seasoned agents is to, um, create a lead generation process. And one thing to all the students and seasoned agents that are on the line is that you can add this to your process of lead generation, where you can inform potential sellers. Hey, by the way, have you thought of, are you thinking about protesting your taxes? I would love to speak to you about that. And then, bring you into that process as well. Like that,
Oh, yes, absolutely. Many people do.
and what happens is in January is when we get those infamous taxes going, oh, you owe this much. I think it comes in December. I'm not sure. And I think it comes in a green paper and a letter in the mail, and you can protest your taxes. And this will be a good way of us as agents to help, because especially in the month of December or November, we're kind of bored. We don't really have a lot of work, usually in the real estate world. And this will be a good way of us generating business and helping people, at least giving them some kind of consulting on protesting their taxes, and then engaging you in that process too. So I just thought about that as you mentioned that about protesting taxes. It would be a good way of us.
Yes, sir. They do have online protests where you can just
Mm-hmm.
get out online with an appraiser at the appraisal district or before the appraisal review board.
Right.
And having worked for the appraisal district for 6 years, I have a pretty good handle on that. So I know what type of data to take in there. So I do a presentation of that for the client, and then they do their own protest.
Exactly. No, yeah, of course. Thank you for clearing that out. But okay, so we're ready for some questions. And ensure that you unmute your computer and present a question to Linda.
This is David.
Hi, David.
Hi. Actually, this happened to me, square footage being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
George Brown Center several years ago, they had auctions on properties, and I actually made an offer on a property. It was a brand new property, never been lived in. I went to the property and I calculated the square footage for some things, and I looked at the appraisal, and they had like 400 square feet difference.
Wow.
Actually 400 square feet less in the house had the appraisal district had shown it as.
It's a tough task that they have, and I'm not trying to beat up on them. I did work for the appraisal district, so I do know. I've worked in South Texas in San Benito, Cameron County Appraisal District. I do know the tough job that they have. They cannot go in. So just picture a two-story vaulted house, with a lot of vaulted areas, and they're thinking it's a full two-story. So you can see right off the bat, there's got to be a discrepancy there, and there are zillions of discrepancies, believe me.
Good question, David. A question I have that I get sometimes is, hey, Fernando, the garage was converted into a living space. Now there's a bed in there with a little AC unit that they made a hole. And can we add that in the square footage?
That's a lovely one. So what you have to do is take a look around at the subdivision that you're in. It's good. Most of the time we're working in subdivisions. We have to admit that there are some subdivisions. The ones that come to mind to me are homes that were built in, say, the 60s over in the Aldine Westfield area. And you can go into that subdivision and every third house is going to have a garage conversion. Some of them are nicely done too, believe me. They run, put the ductwork in, it's got central heating and cooling. And that type of instance, when you have comparables in other properties where it is the norm for the subdivision, it is acceptable.
Wow.
But if yours is the only house out of 500 in a subdivision that has a garage conversion, you can bet your life that the appraiser is going to appraise that as garage space. The second thing that enters is that, once that garage is converted, you lose any garage facility at all for storage or car storage. So
it becomes a negative.
Right, and it can. And so 9 times out of 10, the appraiser is going to come in and value it as garage space and just put in a small figure to reconvert. any areas, take down any partition walls, that type of thing. But there are subdivisions out there where garage conversions are the norm, and they're perfectly okay in those situations, and they can be used as living area.
Okay, great.
Any
other questions?
This is David again. I got a comment on that. I thought like some codes, building codes, in order to be considered a bedroom, you have to have certain things like an egress, ingress, egress, like a window, door, some cases a closet. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, particularly for FHA, you're supposed to have a breakout window for a bedroom. Most of the garage conversions that you're going to see, particularly like I'm stating in the Aldine Westfield and in some of the older parts of town, it's going to be more of a family room, and it's going to flow to the other rooms. So it's kind of at the discretion of the appraiser to make that decision. And if it's a sheetrocked in bedroom with no windows, you've got an issue there. Absolutely.
Now, does a bedroom have to have a closet in order to qualify as a bedroom?
That's a touch and go kind of thing, because a lot of people used to use armoires, remember? Well, y'all are probably way too young to remember that, but sometimes rooms are called bedrooms that should not be called bedrooms. They could just be called an additional room, a bonus room or whatever. But for safety purposes, a bedroom does have to have a window. And there are certain, for FHA, there are certain height specifications for that window too, so that it can be, so a child could get out that window. Okay. That is of importance. But I hate to see garages converted into bedrooms. It's just not a good thing to do.
Okay. Any other questions from our attendees?
Yeah, I have one question. This is Poonam. So from the perspective of a house that has 4 rooms, all 4 have windows, but 1 room might be used as a game room and 3 are being used as a bedroom, is it better to advertise as 4 bedrooms, or is it better to advertise 3 bedrooms and 1 game room? Like what is the better thing to do?
Well, like I say, you have to have the window for the bedroom.
Yeah, it has windows.
Okay, the game room does. Couldn't you put in there that it's optional 3-bedroom, or because a lot of people are using the study also as bedrooms as well. A bedroom as a study, back and forth intermittently. So could you not list it explaining that you have that option?
Yep.
I mean, I would.
That provides the flexibility, right?
Yes. Your thoughts on that, Fernando?
No, I just want to, can you just sort of, for all of us that are maybe got lost a little bit, what would be the verbiage of stating in this example? What would you recommend?
You could say 3-bedroom, optional 4th bedroom as game room or game room.
Okay, got it. I just want everyone to know. It's because we, as new agents, we have to put this in the agent remarks, in the MLS. So this is a good verbiage.
You can put them in both sets of remarks.
Okay, good. Good question, Puna. Any other questions before we wrap it up? Okay. And just for next the staging, maybe something to whet our appetite for the June 13th. Anything you want?
Oh, yes, of course. Well, we always think about staging correlated to sales, but there are some other perspectives or other reasons for staging. For instance, let's say you have a client who is disabled and can't make the move out of their old home and into their new home. They know how they want to line up that furniture, and they have great taste, but they can't implement it. Well, a stager can. We can go in and help them put everything in place. We can help them coordinate their move from their old residence to their new residence. It's a basic concierge type service. So something a little bit different that we offer that other staging companies may not offer. Nice. This applies also for elderly folks transitioning maybe to assisted living from their you know, their lifetime home to assisted living. We can help them with that.
Great, nice. Okay.
Linda,
go
do
ahead.
stagers, I'm sorry, just a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Linda, do stagers bring their furniture, or is it just rearranging the furniture that one might have?
There are a million different scenarios out there. There are vacant homes that were requested to stage, and we go to furniture rental companies and we rent the furnishings. We typically have our own accessories to bring in, and we bring those into the home. There are instances when simply the property owner's furnishings just need to be rearranged. Sometimes some of their furnishings aren't the best quality or in the best condition, so we'll replace a few pieces. Okay, we'll have to get those from a rental company in most cases. And then there are cases where sometimes the seller does not want the expense of staging, but they will agree to a consultation, and we will list out very specifically what needs to be done. And they follow it. And I will show you next month how they do. And they do pretty good, I think.
Linda, can you
Great,
put your
thank you.
Linda, can you put your credentials back so like that people click the slide with your credentials?
Sure.
Yeah. Does anyone ever have any other questions? We're at right 9 o'clock now. I think Karen, you have a question?
Yes. I do have one. So how would you help the people who want to protest the taxes? What would you do, and how much would you charge them?
Okay, I work at $50 an hour basically, and in most cases,
Usually.
I'm sorry. How long would it take me?
Mm-hmm.
Usually we can work it out in an hour or less in most cases. So that's pretty reasonable if you think about it, for what they would ultimately end up saving. And if I can't show them where they could save anything, then it's usually pretty brief, because I can spot the comps pretty easily. So what I do is a basic CMA for them. And then what we do is we walk down the street, we walk through their subdivision in the tax records, and we see if there's any disparity. Like, so there's a lot of times when you look through the tax records, you're going to see the same square footage repeated within a subdivision, because it's basically the same floor plan. You know, they build it several times. And let's say John Smith's house is valued at $150, but Susie Smith's house across the street, same floor plan, is valued at $175, and there's no pool or any other reason for it. They're both interior lots. So when you see a disparity, then maybe Mrs. Smith across the street has a case. Why aren't they valued uniformly? So that's a way of looking at it. And price-wise, what it's valued at. Because they're really catching up with values this year, because they gave us a break last year because of Harvey. And this year they are really catching up. Most of the people that have come to me this year have had a good case. And in years past, it's been touch or go, but this past year has been pretty good. So I provide them with the comparables to go to the appraisal district, the actual printouts of the MLS sales with the closing dates and photographs to take to the appraisal review board, or to present. I send it via email so they can present it to the appraiser.
And
that's on an online protest.
What if it's newer subdivision and there are not a lot of sales going on in the HER? So what would happen there?
Then it could run over a $50 bill, because I would have to do some research and go into maybe some other subdivisions or areas and come up with some good information for them to take to the appraisal district.
Okay.
Yes, Stats, remember she mentioned that she would have to jump like a 1 mile radius and go to another subdivision, kind of looking for similar properties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But those are good questions, Stats.
The 1 mile rule is more or less Fannie Freddie.
Right.
The secondary market, and that's in lending appraisals. The appraisal, I'm not sure, has that criteria, but of course they're going to want the closest properties to be considered as comparables.
Okay.
And the appraisal districts subscribe to MLS. You do know that.
Because
And-
what
and
I
what-
tried to do, I tried to run a CMA for some of my neighbors and see if I could find something similar, and it was hard to find.
Right. And I would suggest Stas that I'm thinking $50 or $100 to invest in getting
Not bad.
getting a real good number and then presenting it to the seller, on your listing appointment or after the listing appointment. You can just say, hey, look, this is what
It should make you look pretty good.
it makes you look really, really good. And then you don't have to worry about, oh, I wonder if it's going to appraise, 35 days later, which is when we usually get the bad news.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the contract fails, and then you have to start all over again, and then you get your commission check. And my thought process.
And the thing about
And my thought process is, let's spend $100 so we don't have to worry about that. 50 to 100.
And the thing about it is you get more nervous the second time out. Once that contract falls out, because your credibility with your seller is weakened at this point. And so you're not looking quite as good as when you first went in.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
Yes.
those are good questions. Any other questions? Stas or I think Karen, I think you had a question. Maybe not.
Yeah, my question is, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The two appraisals can be really different. So if you present the appraisal from, let's say, from you and somebody else appraise it for less or more, what would you do there?
Well, first of all, I'm going to run comparables. I'm not going to write an appraisal for a property in most cases.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's a good question. Yeah,
I'm
she's
going
not
to
gonna
run
write it.
comparables, and I would have you sit down. You and I would be on the computer together, okay? You'd be on your laptop and I'd be on mine, okay? And we would go through and we would pick out the sales that would work. I would be pointing them out to you, and we'd be looking at the pictures and comparing them to your property, okay? Then you would be able to present those comparables to the appraiser to consider in the lending report that the appraiser would do. Okay. And sometimes appraisers do get crazy ideas, and they just, we're not always going to agree 100% of the time, but the majority of the time we're pretty successful here with coming up with comparables to provide to appraisers.
Yeah, but at this time you're making their life easier by presenting your comparables so they can see it and maybe.
Yeah, that might be true, but you also look good in front of your client.
Right, that that you're strong on the value. Now, if this is one of the scenarios where you've gone to your client and you've told them, maybe you sat with me and we picked out a good listing price range that you could present to them, and they said, no, I want to go 20,000 higher than that. Well, at least you've got something to come back on and say, well, now this is where I recommended that we be. We're out on a limb here, and that's maybe why it didn't appraise, But you've got some credibility. They at least know that you were correct. And sometimes that's a hard point to get across, but at least you weren't out there saying, oh, yeah, I think we can get you that. And then it all falls in your face. But you are absolutely correct. Not two appraisals are ever exactly the same, but they should be fairly close within a certain percentage. Years ago, we used to do, I guess they still do, I don't, but relocation appraisals. And the relocation companies would have two appraisals done. And the two appraisals had to be within 5% of each other, or they would order a third appraisal. And they would keep going until they got two appraisals that were within 5%. So there can be a fluctuation.
So 5% is a good number.
So why? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
So you said 5% is a good number if you can differentiate, but no more.
I would think so. Of course, home values are going up. So 5% of 300,000 is a whole lot more than, say, 150. So.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Great. Those are good questions, man. Any other questions? I know it's already getting late, and everybody has to go and do some more real estate sales. That's my thinking.
You keep working.
Yeah, we got to keep on working as realtors. Any other questions, guys? I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Hope y'all learned a lot. Linda, thank you so much for your time as well.
Absolutely. Anytime. And please, may I reiterate, feel free to take my number, call me up if you have questions. I'll be glad to go over anything with them.
Great.
Thank
you, guys.
Could you put your number up?
Yes.
Thanks so much, Linda.
Could you put your number out there again? It was so fast I couldn't catch.
Can you see that, David? It's 832-689-2242.
Okay.
Linda Wilkins.
Right, I got her name. Thank you.
Great, guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Fernando. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you.
Linda, thank you